and we're all about leveling up in all areas of life on this show. And we work with entrepreneurs, business owners is our target market. But everybody knows we love fitness. We're at the World Championships of High Rocks in France in June. So we're focused on our marriages, our relationships with people, and so we're always focused on the key areas that we all have a wonderful life, right?
Yeah.
And when I saw that Joe Cohen was coming on the show and all that he does and how he does it, it's like this is the grounding point for all things that we do. Because if you don't have what we're talking about today right, then none of those things can be optimal. This is the ultimate level up episode because this is the building block of energy, the clear mind, healthy body. And so today we're going to be digging into all things leveling up. Joe Cohen, the SelfDecode, the founder of, man, it's new, right? But it's the oldest thing that we could be talking about because it's genetics, right? The genome, how the body works, and how we're all so different. Could you give us a little bit about yourself, and then also just dive into how, in the most simple form, how this helps people in all areas of their life? It's talking about business, relationships, all the things. And welcome to the show, PS. I'm very excited. I can't wait to jump into this one.
All right, yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, man. Thanks for
So I got started because I had a whole bunch of different health problems, small and large, mostly small, but like let's say 75 health problems, and they kind of came together and it was not good. So performance, I basically just was a wreck in all areas of life. And for me, I knew there was something wrong with my biology. So that got me into understanding that I need to change my biology in order to function properly. And at a certain point, I got to, I just experimented with everything. I did a lot of reading, had a lot of, understood how the body works. And I was able to, just throwing everything at the wall, I was able to find a whole bunch of things that worked for me. And I got to a point where I was healthier than the average person. But then there was another period where later on, I said, why be just better than average? Why not be the best in every area? So how can I optimize every area of my life through optimizing my biology? And so the thesis was that I could change my programming. I mean, you have certain hardware that's not going to change. You're not going to go from 100 IQ to 200 IQ. But you can change the software, and there's a lot that you can optimize through software changes. It's like if you have an old computer, it's not going to just run like super quick, but you can make much more efficient software that could really optimize how things work. And that could have a very big effect. So the hardware is important, but most of, the hardware can degrade as you get older through just cumulative damage. But, it's also like a car. You can take care of it well and it won't rust as much. And if you don't abuse it, and you can really optimize the software in a lot of different areas that you can change whatever area of your life that you want. So what we do at SelfDecode is we predict disease based on your genetics, what your predispositions are, and just in general, what are your weaknesses? And we can tell you what lab tests to track and how to get those lab tests and in the optimal range in order to prevent those diseases, whether it's down the line or also if you have an issue that you want to optimize now. Basically, how to tune the body in a way that it's working optimally now. And so everybody has different, in some way, different operating system and different hardware a little bit. And the software that you need to use could be different based on what that operating system is. And so what I've done was I've been able to figure out how to, what am I at risk for? How do I just optimize everything? And, even things that you wouldn't expect to optimize, I've been able to optimize.
Like what?
I become extroverted. for example. You wouldn't assume that you could become extroverted from supplements or whatever, right? It's not something that you would have expected.
Hmm.
But it happened. Like I've done rigorous psychology testing before and after. I would say so. Neuroticism is something that's supposed to be relatively stable over your lifetime, which is one of the big five personality factors. It's the tendency to anxiety, depression, any kind of negative feelings that has gone down to zero based on the new assessment, right? So that's not something that you would expect to change. But just extroversion and that, and yeah, I would say overall cognitive function. I mean, that maybe some people can expect to change, but what else would I? I mean, those are. I would say those are just examples of unexpected things.
Very cool.
One of my questions, Joe, is so we're all about optimizing health because it just affects all these other areas of life. So I couldn't agree with you more on that, especially with business owners, entrepreneurship, just managing the stress and just feeling good, looking good, and just showing up and being able to optimize our day. Well, and I told Ewan before the podcast, before you came on the show, is sometimes we don't get testing or we don't get blood testing. And myself included, I've looked back and I told you, and I was like, man, it's been 18 months. And I sit here and preach it, teach it, and it's important to me. Why haven't I taken action on getting these blood tests on a routine basis? Because if it's important to me, then I need to be intentional about it, getting it done once a quarter, or maybe even at the very least, the very minimum, once a year. Why do you feel at SelfDecode that when people come to you, or before they come to you, I'm sure this is a challenge. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. How do you get that out there to like, hey, you need to come and do this testing, this self-assessment now versus waiting? Because in my mind, when I don't take action in getting a blood test or getting an assessment like this, then I just procrastinate. I sweep it underneath the rug and I move on with my life.
Yeah, so I think first the foundation is a genetics test. Everybody needs a genetics test, a cutting edge genetic test like self-decode cells. Not in the industry, there's a lot of scammy genetics tests because it's very hard to distinguish between what's
Really,
crap and what's not. Yeah, so
really.
almost all of them are junk. Um, so that's number one, important to know, and it's hard to know because I mean, you really have to. It has to be validated, and that's what we did. We published studies on large populations and showing the predictive power of the test. But normally, a lot of these genetic tests are just a very simple static PDF looking at 100 variants. We're looking at 200 million variants, and it's a very dynamic platform that uses AI and a whole bunch of advanced technologies. So that's number one. But if you get a good genetic test, it's worth every penny. So I would say that that's the foundation. This way, what are you at risk for, what are all your predispositions, and it gives you a foundation to work with after that. In terms of blood testing, in terms of other things. So the foundation, the way that somebody wants to approach their health is they want to look at five main parameters. One is, what are your symptoms and conditions, right? And most people don't know this off the bat. They won't realize it. If I ask, do you have any symptoms or conditions? Somebody's going to be like, no. And then what I'm thinking is like, I'm looking at you, and not you guys, but like this person has acne or something. So like that's a visible symptom and condition, and they're telling me no. It's just one example, right? So there's a lot of things people don't think of as a symptom or a condition of anything. They're like,
Exactly.
no, I'm 100% healthy, but I could look at somebody and be like, you've got fungus on your toes, or you
Mm,
know, like that is a symptom of immunodeficiency, and just just fungal infection and whatnot. So I could look at somebody and see that they're not 100% healthy, and they don't even realize. They're just like, no, I'm 100% fine. Which I don't know what's going on inside them, but people have way more issues than they think. They just don't think of, what's going on really. You're like, oh yeah, I have a headache every once a week, but that's not a big deal. That's a symptom, right? So you got to like look at all these things together. So you look at your symptoms and conditions. You want to then look at your goals. What are you trying to accomplish? What's most important right now in your life? And you want to look at your genetic risks. You want to look at your labs that are out of the optimal range. And then you want to look at your lifestyle risks, things that like you can't really capture by genetics or necessarily a lab test. It's, if you were dropped as a kid, or, maybe there's just different lifestyle factors, right, that have a influence. So you want to look at all these separate variables that are somewhat intertwined as well. Or if you have a genetic predisposition for something, you're more likely to have that symptom and condition. But you might not have it if you're young enough, or just you weren't exposed to something. So you look at all those separately. One of the things that we do at SelfDecode is that we give you that DNA test, but we also give you the software that you can input all these things: your symptoms, conditions, goals, your labs, your DNA, and then you fill out some questionnaires, and then we show you how the recommendation is good for all these areas. So that's kind of that's how I go about, in general. That's like the framework of health, and you need software for that because it's too many variables in order to look at it. So we have a recommendations engine, and you go through the top recommendations. You could see, okay, how does this thing help me? And so that's kind of the big picture of how I do health. And then sometimes I'll go deeper into specific topics like lab testing. So one of your questions was why. Basically, if I were to rephrase the question, is how do I get the motivation, or how do you convince people that I should be doing frequent lab testing?
Right.
The answer is that you want to try to use as many data points as possible to make a decision. So one data point could be your symptoms or conditions. If you have anxiety, you could try this supplement that has a study showing it's good for anxiety. If you if you had a parent or grandparent that died from cardiovascular disease, you might have some kind of idea that maybe I'm at risk for that, and I want to try to do things to lower my risk. It's like a lifestyle risk, you could say. And you might, if you're doing certain things like drinking or smoking or whatever it is, those are lifestyle variables. If you're overweight, you want to make sure you address those risks. And then you're going to have just DNA risks that you want to understand. What am I at risk for in the future, right? What am I most likely to die from? And the problem with chronic disease is that you don't get them from day one to day two. They progress and they build up damage over time.
Yeah.
And then, so where the labs come in, that tells you, it's one of the few things besides your symptoms and conditions, it tells you what is going on right now. And as opposed to, so the thing that's unique about lab testing is that one is it doesn't lie, meaning like I can give you something and you could say, I'm not sure if I notice a difference in this. And then I could say, well, maybe you don't notice the difference, but I could see a difference in your labs, right?
Yeah.
We see a clear difference. And that has happened sometimes where people are like, I don't notice anything from the supplement. You don't have to, right? We see how it's changing your labs. And so there's some people that just, and it happened with me too. I mean, there's certain supplements I don't notice anything from, but I clearly see it changes my lab markers. And then there's certain things that I tried and I thought maybe it was even not working for me. And then I started taking it because of my lab markers. And then over the long haul, I started to see my labs improving. And then I started seeing that general function is improving. An example of that would be arginine and citrulline. I tried arginine. I said, I don't think I do well with this. And then I just stopped, right? I took a bunch of blood tests, measuring everything. I always take blood tests. And so I kept seeing that my arginine levels were consistently low. I'm like, suboptimal. And I said, okay, so the best way to increase arginine is actually through citrulline, not arginine itself. I mean, it'll also increase it, but if I started taking citrulline, it increased it. And I said, okay, you know what? Actually, I wanted to increase it even more. So I took more. I would never have known to do that. And then, over time, I see, you know what? My immune system is working a lot better than it ever did. It's not something you're going to tell from, taking a supplement and for a day or two and saying, oh, my immune system is better. Very hard to tell that. So the way that I do these things is I have a combination of things I do. I do megadosing experiments. So if I really like something from a megadosing experiment, I'll do that. I will look at all the symptoms, conditions that I've ever had in the past. More recent, the better, but I'll look at things that I've always had in the past. And the newest thing, the problem is that through that approach, I kind of hit a dead end almost, where it's a little hard, especially when you're taking a lot of things. It becomes even harder to see what's going on.
Yep.
But when you look at the blood tests, you're already not looking. There's no opinions. It's just very clear that when a blood test is in a certain range, that's where the healthiest people are. And if you're not in that range, there's some reason you're not in it. And time again, what I found is that when I get in that range, sometimes you think like, every time I thought maybe I just, can't get into this range because my body's built different. I've always ended up getting into that range, right? So there's never been a situation where I haven't been able to get into an optimal range. And then you also notice that over time, your body becomes more optimal. So it used to be the case where I just wanted to get rid of my acute issues just to be like a relatively normal person. Then I did that. And then now it's, if I see somebody better than me in a certain area, whether they have more endurance or they recover more quickly or whatever, I start thinking, well, how do I become the best in this area? And
Man, you're speaking to the right two guys. We said this before the show that we had not done this test yet, and we kind of laugh. We're like, he's got 2 new customers already. We haven't done it, but I'm after just what you said. I'm like doing it immediately after this. I took arginine for the longest time, and I got the same thing. I was like, I don't know what this is really doing. Started taking citrulline because it's the precursor, or I'm not sure which one is the precursor, but I started taking citrulline, and I really felt something from it. So I've just continued to take it. And I thought it was more like blood flow, like it helped like workouts. But I hadn't realized it was an immune system thing. And I'm the kind of person that would get sick 3, 4, 5 times a year, stress, poor diet, whatever, not doing all the things that I've been doing for longer periods now. But I have noticed my immune system is insanely stronger than it's ever been. I haven't been sick in pretty much a year, which is the longest I've ever gone with not being sick. And my daughter, she'll get sick. Normally that's a guarantee I'm going to get sick. And I've just blown right past this sickness. So citrulline, is that specific for certain people, or would it not work for other folk? Or would that be true for everyone? And I guess this follow-up question is there some key foundational supplements that you would recommend that would help for everybody? Or is it that individualistic where people would really have to figure out what's best for them?
So it's individualistic. There's some things, not everybody needs arginine or citrulline. That's for sure, right? There's some things that everybody needs, and just the question is how much, right? So
like what? What would be an example of that?
Everybody needs fish oil.
Yeah.
Right? The question is how much are you taking though, right? Or how much you need to take. So that you want to measure your blood. And, you can get a general advice and say, well, this is a good general amount to take, but some people need more, some people need less. And the only way to know is to take it and test it out. That's it. So that's what I've done. I've just been testing, and I keep going up on the dosage based on exactly what I need. For me, I found that I need at least 4 grams of concentrated fish oil. That's 1.5 grams of EPA a day. If I don't get that, my blood markers are not optimal for fish oil.
What's the daily recommended dose? It's less than that, right? Because they say
on the bottle you'll see half that, so like 2 grams of concentrated fish oil.
Yes.
And then a lot of times uh, most of the fish oil on the market is not even concentrated, so you're getting even half of that,
Do
right?
you recommend a brand? Do you ever recommend brands, or who would you say on the fish oil?
Sometimes I do. Fish oil, I take the Life Extension one. Um, yeah,
That's
that's
what I
just the
thought.
one I've been using for a while.
Yeah, that's a good one. And that's fascinating. And so when people are, does it all boil down to diet and exercise at the end of the day? So they get the report back, and they're going to have to either eat different things or include new things, and then obviously activity is paramount. And you got sleep. Is it really just what you're saying? They're just tweaking the right thing very specifically for those right people, and that's what the test would ultimately do, or
Absolutely.
is there
Yeah.
more
So
to it?
it's the right supplements, the right diet, right lifestyle. I would say that I'm personally, bigger fan of supplements because when you get to a very basic level, like let's say, uh, you're not smoking, you're not over drinking, everybody's trying to sleep. I mean, like I don't think anyone's not trying to sleep. Um, and you're already exercising, right? I could just, you know, I could see based on you guys. Just I don't have to ask you, but I know you're exercising. I know you're trying to sleep. Maybe you don't get great sleep every night, but it's a goal, right?
Yeah.
And then you're trying not to drink too much. You're you're not smoking. You're trying to just live a decently healthy life. Just not knowing anything about you. I don't have to, right? The idea is that anybody, if you see somebody in the gym, they're probably not a huge smoker, or they're again, but that's like a typical. The idea is that the average person who's into fitness is not going to be smoking. Is not going to be. They're trying to be healthy. They're trying to eat healthy. Then the question is, what is healthy eating? Right? You're going to get a thousand different opinions on that.
Yeah.
So you guys are trying to eat healthy too, right? Then the question is, now you're doing everything. This is kind of like a baseline,
Right.
and then the question is, where are you, right? What I'm seeing is that I see people doing all these things, and they're still far from optimal.
Yeah,
They're doing all these things,
that's
right?
right.
And they're still. I don't know, what you guys are like, but I'm just saying, I see people doing all these things, and they're just still far from optimal. So, and then there's very, very few lucky people that are doing all these things, and then they're pretty close to optimal, right?
So
So
when I hear you say optimal, I use that word all the time. And to me, I know what it feels like, very, very personalized. I know I'm very religious. I'm very obsessed with optimizing my day, my energy, and conserving it. So I understand the importance of diet, sleep, nutrition, exercise. I've put a lot of work into this. Even I do supplements as well. I've narrowed that down. And the reason I do all this is because we went and saw a nutritionist, a holistic nutritionist a couple of years ago. We hired a coach, paid thousands of dollars, and she went over the biomarkers with us. And she was pointing out that if you go to a routine doctor, conventional doctor, they're going to say, oh, you're good. This is the baseline. And so one of the things that she pointed out to me that I thought was very interesting, my levels were good. They were all good. But she's like, Sean, you didn't pay all this money to come in and tell you that you're good. You want to optimize. That's why I told her. I was like, I want to optimize all my levels. So of course she had some different supplements like DHEA and some of the other supplements that we ended up taking over time. Now, it's like what you said earlier when I started, because it's an investment, right? And so I started spending all this money and I started doing all these different things for 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. And I think it helped. It probably helped more psychology than anything. But I know the different pillars that's really helped me out, which is sleep, exercise, and nutrition. Right? Without those, I could sit here all day long and try to optimize my health, but I'm getting 4 hours of sleep. What's the point? And so my question is to you: if you have somebody that's maybe with a similar mindset that's thinking like, okay, yes, I want to come in, I want to do the blood test, and I know I want to learn my baseline and I want to improve on that. Do you offer any kind of guidance? Is there any kind of guidance, even from your own personal experience? Like, what do you do next? And I think that there's a lot of confusion there. It's like, even people that I know in my life that have went through this, spent all this money, but then when it's time to actually get some kind of guidance on what's next, there's really no clear action steps. And does that make sense?
Yeah, we have in SelfDecode, we make sure there's very clear action steps about what you need to do and why you need to do it. So that if you forget, you can always just look back and see and follow the crumbs, right? Am I being told to do this? And we show you, well, because of this DNA risk, this lab risk that you have, and this symptom and condition, and these, X, Y, Z, and it prioritizes it for you. So it tells you exactly what you need to do based on all the data that you input.
Can you
You
give
only
me
have DNA data.
Can you
Yeah.
give me an example on what that would look like? So if my DHEA or if something like that, testosterone, I can never say that word right, but if that was
Testosterone?
yes, if that was low, if it's not, an optimal level, 800, 900, whatever the optimal level is, and that's 200, 300. And again, guys, people, girls listening to this, they're not going to know unless they get the test. But what would be some action steps for somebody to improve that moving forward?
So there's a lot of things, and I haven't come across any biomarker that can't be moved, including testosterone. Just to give you my own example, mine went from 450 to 1100, not with TRT or anything like that. So that's an example of being able to move a biomarker, and you could do it with all the other biomarkers, right?
Yeah.
Same with you could list any biomarker. I could show you my whole history, and I could show you how it moves. It's not it's not my opinion. I could show you for a fact, and I can explain it. Now, and there's also tens of thousands of studies showing that biomarkers can move. It's not a question. So then the question is, you just need a system, a software to take all that data together and match it up with the recommendations database to prioritize the correct recommendations, which is what we do. If I could share my screen, I could show you how it looks, but otherwise it's hard to explain. But you could see visually that it shows you exactly what you need to do.
Yeah,
that's fascinating, man. You mentioned something too, like that you became more extroverted. Could you use that as an example? We can't see, obviously sharing the screen. What would that journey look like? You were low in something, you took something, and it raised those numbers, and then you see this kind of this feeling or this mindset. Like, what's that journey? Because I'm sure that is very similar to maybe any of the journeys that somebody's low on something. Like, what would be the example to that?
Yeah, so just give you a little bit of a background also. I've made it a point, in part because I haven't found it helped me very much, but also just because I think this, changing my biology is the best bang for my buck. I made it a point to never do any kind of mindset hacks. So never try to do positive thinking, never try to visualize success or any of that stuff, right? Like, it's just a lot of things and I'm not saying it doesn't work. It's just kind of like, for me, it's never had a huge impact, right? And it takes effort, and I kind of want to, I try to do the things that have the most impact first, and also to just try to, isolate the variables as much as possible. So supplements had a very big impact for me. And so I focused very much on that. And, so I try to not do anything like, any like just whatever psychotherapy or anything like that. I just do the supplements, right? So what, in terms of extroversion, what that has to do is it's related to a bunch of neurotransmitters: serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, glutamate, and but it's mainly, what I found is that a lot of people are extroverted for a period, right? You go to a party, like, maybe it takes you a little bit to get into it, but but the idea is that a lot of times what you see is that people are extroverted, and the question is how long they can be extroverted for before they burn out. That burnout is serotonin. So when you are socializing and your nervous system is activated, your serotonin starts burning out. And people have different stores of serotonin. So if you burn out serotonin quickly, you will be depleted quickly. If you are stressed, it will deplete your serotonin quickly. So there's a lot of things that deplete serotonin. And, and then if you are social, it could deplete it again. And then you're, burnt out, if you will. You don't want to socialize. So there's different components to introversion or extroversion. That's one of them. Is the question is, okay, after a party, do you feel energized or do you want to slink back and recharge? The recharge is to recharge serotonin. So if you have enough of a store of serotonin, then you don't need to recharge. One of the aspects of uh, extroversion that I changed, or introversion, is that I don't have to recharge because I have high enough stores of serotonin. So just increasing serotonin by a lot helped. And, you're able to see through genetics and other things if you're low in serotonin. So what I found, so that was one aspect of it. Now serotonin is also more than just, there's the amount of serotonin, which is a factor. There's also various receptors. And there's certain things you could do to increase the 2A receptor, which helps with extroversion. And there's a creative part of extroversion too. So what I found is that I didn't have the burnout, but one aspect of introversion, extroversion is if you're around people, you can feel awkward if you don't have things to say, which I think it's a little more of a creativity, like a positive emotionality thing. So if you have higher serotonin, it might not be a positive emotion kind of thing. It'll be like a lack of negative emotion, but it won't be the positive side. And so activating that receptor, you can do it through supplements in part, but also through psychedelics. But more long term, you can do it through supplements. And so the 2A receptor, the serotonin 2A receptor is important for that. I found that is also helped me. And things, there's, supplements like, so to increase serotonin, tryptophan 5-HTP, that helps. To increase the 2A receptor, things like chromium can help. Things like certain bacopa extracts and certain supplements can help with that.
Do you start
And
people out on slow
yeah,
doses with that and work them up to see the blood markers, or how do you kind of gauge someone off? Because this
with
right
the
here, what
mood
we're talking
stuff,
about.
you're not looking so much at blood markers with mood stuff. I mean, if you optimize your blood markers, your mood will improve. But there's certain things that just won't show up. You can't really check for your serotonin in the blood.
Can't check for that. Okay, it's so important though, because people could hear this and it can sound technical, and you're doing these little things, but when it shows up, like if this is a business owner or anybody, and it shows up in their conversation, and they have more energy, or they have that creative thought to make that extra move or to make that decision that was good for them, that's a compounding effect of that's life right there. It just starts stacking up, and if you're able to do these extra things, like Sean said, he conserves his energy. If you could tap in and increase that 10, 20, 30%, what more can happen out here in the real world? And this is it all comes from within inside. So it's of the utmost importance. Like, this is the energy generating machine, and whatever level you're at is going to have outcomes. And what you're talking about here is very exciting, because where is the limits for people? There might not be any. Like, you see these people who do unbelievable things, and maybe it's just because they've had their ducks in a row internally, and that could be true for anybody. And so it's very exciting technology that you've come up with. And so when you deal with high level people and you're checking their markers, you're working with them, how do you decide which direction to go, and how is it more of a feeling that they report back to you, like that this is working, and then they see results?
Yeah. So first of all, the recommendations are all laid out, so you're able to see what the system is recommending based on everything you're inputted. So that's important to. You could even put creativity as a goal. But in terms of how I personally deal with like high level clients, there's things that they won't notice, but I could see on the blood test. They're not going to know if their LDL is going up or down, right? Or if their the inflammation is even going up or down, or their liver function, or these just things they won't notice. So I will look at what they do notice is symptoms and conditions, right? So if they have more energy or less energy, if their sleep improves, things like that, people will notice. So what I'll do is I'll make sure they're noticing changes in that area, and then I also show the lab markers. So I did have one client, um, very famous guy, um, not in the U.S. though, actually. But what was interesting, like he actually did an experiment that went wrong. He didn't follow what I told him to do.
That's
Anyway,
not
he did
good.
something else. Whatever. It's a long story, but and so he kind of like was, he felt weird for a day, um, and then he had anxiety. He thought maybe he's like getting worse, and he's not sure. And I showed him his blood test. I said, "Look, everything's getting better here, right?" And he realized, wait a second, he didn't know. Sometimes it's hard to like really like. First, he said like, "Yeah, I'm feeling amazing," and then he did that one bad experiment, and and so he was like more psychologically unstable. He was afraid, am I ruining my body here? I said, look, no, look at your lab tests. Your kidneys are getting better. Your liver function, your inflammation levels are going down. Everything's getting better here. And then he started to get back into then he started to feel better again. He just kind of freaked out for a day. And so it's important to have that dashboard objectively. So I know if somebody's doing better or not, even if they don't tell me yes or like. But he realized. I said, look, just give it a few more days. You're going to see. You're going to get back into baseline. One of the things that came out also was that he had an infection when he caught a bug, right? Because he said, look, I'm not feeling good. I'm weaker. I'm this. I said, good thing we just did a blood test because it shows you have an infection, but still all of your markers are doing better. I said, just wait a couple of days, retest. Wait a couple of days. He started feeling great again, right? It's like people, right? So I was able to see based on the blood test that he had an infection. I was able to see that even with the infection, still a lot of things were getting better. And I was like, chill out. It was a combination of he had an infection and he did a bad experiment that was against what I said. But then he just realized like, oh yeah, you're right. Now he's back to baseline and feels great, and he's sees that his blood tests are improving. So it's a combination of both of those things that if you don't have the blood test, a lot of times it's hard to like. It's just whatever this person is telling me, right?
Yeah.
They're leaving things out, but now I have their dashboard. I see exactly what's going on. So look what's happening, right? And you could do it without me. The software it gives you recommendations without me, but I just, I could tell you something like you have an infection, and it's like that's just based on my clinical. I could see which markers are. The software is just going to tell you have these. It's going to give you recommendations which are going to be good, but sometimes it helps. But the idea is that it also has an AI health coach there that you could ask any of your own questions to. So that's also a cool feature.
That's awesome. How often would you recommend somebody that's trying to optimize their well-being do the blood test? How often is it recommended to redo the blood test?
I like doing it for myself every 2 weeks. I tell clients to do it every 2 weeks also.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So the reason is because you don't want to start treating any blood test until you have a reliable baseline for all of them. I mean, you could start, but the idea is that you want to develop a baseline. Most people don't have that baseline,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And so you want to do comprehensive testing, develop a baseline, and then you could then you start making changes, and you see how those markers are changing over time. So, and by the way, what I found is that uh, even if you don't realize it, a lot of people are fighting infections when they don't realize. So you could take a lab test once, and they'll give you out of whack results. The last time I took a lab test, I didn't even know I had an infection, but I saw my lab test and I said, "Oh, interesting." I didn't even realize.
Yeah.
And when you're traveling, you're picking up more bugs. So I'm doing more testing when I'm traveling. And you go on an airplane, you're at the airport, you're indoors, you're meeting a lot of different people, you're traveling across, across the globe, and you're just picking up infections all over the globe. Now you have another infection that you get once a year, COVID. You got the flu, you got, so many different kinds of infections. And, it's just, but yeah, I've been able to, through the testing, I've been able to improve my immune system. And I don't get less infections, but I don't have symptoms when I get the infection. So I have less symptoms when I get the infection. I probably get more infections because I used to be afraid of getting infections because I knew every time I would go travel, I'd just get an infection and then I would be like disabled for a week, right? Now I'm not afraid of the infections, but so I just get even more of them. But it
It's funny. I
doesn't weigh me
resonate with
down.
that. I hadn't heard it put like that, but like I feel I used to be petrified of getting sick. I'm like, I know it's coming. I I can't afford to get sick. It means I won't be able to work out. Won't be able to perform well at work. So I'd always be like,
Correct.
when's it going to happen? It created its own form of stress. Now I feel like, man, I want to go hug a sick person because I feel like I can handle it. It's almost like its own challenge. But I never would have done that before. But I feel innately that's true, and I think I'm at my very early stages of that. So what you're talking about is I want to 10x this feeling, and if we all check our financial statements, our portfolios, we can see what's going up, see what's going down, and we check that religiously. But man, we don't check our blood report. We don't check our genetic makeup, and yet we should be checking that, like you're saying, every 2 weeks. We should be really dialing in. If you really want to live a phenomenal life and be aware of what's making that tick, this is like a no-brainer to me. I'm like, this is a must. You must do it because, again, your moments of your life are the quality of those are your life, and this is everything we're talking about right here. Like to optimize how the body and brain work together. You don't have anything other than that. Everything else is just thought.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point. I actually don't even check my bank account ever. Um, I like to check my blood markers because I know I can improve them.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I just want to check them as often as possible. And, my bank account, just looking at it is not going to do anything, right? It's not going up.
Great point.
So I don't even check my bank account, right?
Yeah.
I just check my blood markers.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
Well, awesome, Joe. Man, you've spoke our language today. You've been nothing but awesome today. We really appreciate you saying yes to being on the show, brother. Appreciate your time, energy, and effort, man. Wrapping things up, 2 final questions for you. How can our listeners, how can we at Level Up and Live support you, man?
Yeah, I mean, the company is SelfDecode. So people who want to get a genetic test, upload lab results, get recommendations, they can go to selfdecode.com. On Instagram, I'm Mr. Biohacker, MR Biohacker. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I checked out your bio, your Instagram, and I saw that you were recently in France, Paris.
I was. Yeah, I travel a lot. I've been in many countries lately.
Well, you almost got
Picking up
arrested.
infections.
You almost got arrested, I see.
Well, not arrested, but fined for being shirtless.
Yeah, apparently it's illegal to sell DNA testing in France. Is that what I'm seeing correctly?
It's also illegal, yeah, and just it's illegal to have Telegram in France also.
That's just mind blowing to me, man. Like, why would you not allow your people? It shouldn't even be allowed. Will allow you to do this or don't do this. This is their life, man. They should be able to go check their DNA out, see what's good for them.
They should be able to take their shirt off, check their DNA out, and be able to start an app called Telegram without getting arrested.
Absolutely,
exactly, 100%. We'll have all the links in the show notes as well. Second and final question: what does level up and live mean to you?
Level up means having energy, not being stressed or depressed. So having low negative emotions,
Yeah.
and being that, I think that in turn translates into happiness. So,
Yeah.
you know, for me, happiness is just a lack of negative emotions, really.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, so, energy and like, positive outlook. I think these are all based on the neurochemistry and biology of what we are. And so I just, modifying our biochemistry is how I like to, is how I optimize all these areas.
Hmm. I love that, man. We haven't had an answer like that for what does level up and live mean to you. And I really, man, you said the lack of negative emotions is happiness. And I'm thinking in my mind, that's real. That's peace. You're at peace there. And that is worth its weight in gold, right? To be able to have that, man. So that was a beautiful answer.
Yeah. And the lack of, I mean, it's peace, but then happiness comes, like the positives come throughout life. You have good events. If you take out the negatives, you're still gonna have positives, right? So you're gonna, like, I don't know, that's kind of what I've done is just, instead of trying to, I guess I just try to change my neurochemistry so that it takes out the negatives, and that in turn improves the positives.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And I'm a believer, man. I'm getting the test, man. I'm going to self-decode. I'm going to sign up and get it done, man. I can't wait. I'm like, I can't wait to get all the stuff checked.
Awesome.
Thanks again, Joe. All right. Level up and live.
Yeah, level up.
Great talking.
Awesome, man.